community hall was buzzing with excitement. Families crowded the seats, some perched on the edges, others chatting quietly while waiting for the talent show to begin. It was the kind of small-town event where everyone knew everyone, and the atmosphere was warm but filled with anticipation. Children ran around, their laughter bouncing off the walls, while parents tried to keep them settled. On the stage, a few acts had already performed. Some sang songs, their voices trembling with nerves, while others recited short poems. The audience clapped politely, but most seemed to be waiting for something truly special, something that would make them remember this day. In the back of the hall, a small boy sat quietly, his legs swinging slightly above the floor. He held a worn notebook close to his chest, the corners frayed and pages filled with music he had practiced for years. He was smaller than most of the other kids performing, and his clothes were simple, nothing flashy. He watched the stage carefully, listening to the applause and laughter, wishing he could be up there too. But every time he thought about asking, a tiny voice inside him whispered that he might not be good enough. Finally, his moment came. The announcer, a cheerful woman with a microphone, asked if anyone else wanted to perform before the next break. The boy stood up slowly, holding his notebook tightly, and walked toward the stage. His steps were careful, almost hesitant, and he felt the eyes of the entire hall following him. Whispers started around the room. Some children snickered, and a few adults exchanged amused glances. "Isn't he too young?" one whispered. "He probably can't play anything interesting," another said quietly. The boy climbed the steps to the stage and paused for a moment, looking at the grand piano in front of him. It gleamed under the bright lights, its polished surface reflecting the faces of the audience. He swallowed hard, feeling his stomach twist with nervousness. He set his notebook down on the piano bench, taking a deep breath to steady himself. The laughter and whispers didn't hurt him at first, but he could feel the doubt in the room, like a cold wind brushing against him. Some people in the audience were clearly ready to be entertained by the misstep of a small, inexperienced child. He walked over to the piano and lifted the lid, revealing the black and white keys that he had spent countless hours practicing on. His fingers hovered over them, unsure at first. The audience leaned back in their seats, some crossing their arms, others trying not to show that they were curious at all. A few kids in the front row whispered to each other, giggling softly. The boy felt his heart beating faster, but he remembered the countless nights he had practiced in secret, when no one was watching, when the house was quiet and the piano was all his world. He told himself that he could do this. He had to do this. With a shaky hand, he pressed the first key. A soft note filled the hall. It was gentle and small, almost like a whisper. The audience reacted immediately. Some people raised their eyebrows, some chuckled quietly, and a few leaned forward, curious. The boy continued, pressing a few more keys, his fingers learning the familiar patterns by memory. The notes were uneven, slightly hesitant, but there was a clear sense of effort, a determination that could not be ignored. A woman in the front row, probably a teacher or a parent, nodded encouragingly. She could see the boy's dedication, the way his eyes were focused on the keys and not on the audience. He was not performing for applause or recognition. He was performing because it was the one thing he could not stop himself from doing. The notes began to form a simple melody, soft but deliberate. Slowly, the whispers and laughter around the hall began to fade as people started listening more closely. Some of the children stopped giggling, their eyes widening as they tried to understand the music. Even some of the adults who had been skeptical found themselves leaning forward, drawn in by the sincerity of his playing. The boy's confidence grew with each note. His fingers moved a little faster, more sure, and the melody began to sound smoother. It was still simple, not complicated, but it carried a beauty that caught people off guard. The hall seemed to hold its breath. There was a subtle shift in energy, a change from doubt to curiosity. The small boy who had entered the stage almost invisible was beginning to command attention, not through force, but through the quiet power of his music. He played for a few more minutes, each note carefully chosen, each chord striking the right balance of emotion and technique. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, yet the audience found themselves impressed. People who had started the performance with a smirk now found themselves smiling in surprise, some nodding subtly to the rhythm. A few children whispered to each other, pointing to his fingers as they moved effortlessly, their previous laughter replaced with admiration. As he finished the first part of his piece, he looked up briefly, meeting the eyes of a few audience members. There was no arrogance, no seeking of praise, just a quiet acknowledgement of the shared moment. The hall was no longer filled with doubt and ridicule. Instead, it was filled with anticipation. People were waiting to see what this small boy could do next. The first part of the performance had transformed the atmosphere, turning skepticism into curiosity and amusement into respect. He took a deep breath, allowing himself a moment to relax, and then positioned his fingers over the keys again. The first part of the performance had given him courage. He realized that he didn't need to worry about the laughter or the whispers anymore. He could focus only on the music, on the melody that had been growing inside him for so long. The piano seemed to respond to him, the keys familiar under his fingers, each note rising with clarity and emotion. In that moment, the boy felt a strange sense of calm. The world outside the stage ceased to exist. He was no longer a small, timid child under the scrutiny of the audience. He was a musician, expressing something that words could never capture. The audience, sensing the shift, became silent. The whispers had stopped entirely, replaced by a quiet, attentive energy. Everyone in the hall was leaning in, waiting for the next note, for the next movement in the melody. The boy pressed the keys again, this time with more confidence, letting the music flow naturally. The notes filled the room, carrying a simple but profound beauty. He moved through the melody with a sense of purpose, his earlier nervousness replaced by focus and joy. The audience watched, captivated. They could see the dedication and passion behind each note, the countless hours of practice that had led to this moment. There was a tangible connection between the boy and the listeners, a bridge built entirely from sound and emotion. As the first part of the performance came to an end, the boy lifted his hands from the keys, feeling a small smile tug at the corners of his mouth. He looked at the audience and saw expressions of surprise, curiosity, and admiration. Some children clapped quietly, almost shyly, while a few adults nodded in appreciation. It wasn't the thunderous applause that some performers might crave, but it was genuine. It was the kind of response that told him he had been heard, that his music had made a mark, however small. He took a deep breath, readying himself for the next part of the performance. The laughter and whispers from the beginning were now memories, fading echoes of doubt that could no longer reach him. The boy realized that this was just the beginning, that he had the chance to show everyone what he was truly capable of. And with that thought, he sat taller, placed his fingers on the keys once more, and let the music take over entirely. The boy took a deep breath and let his fingers glide over the piano keys once again. This time, the music came more smoothly, more confidently. The shaky, hesitant notes of the first part had disappeared, replaced by a gentle rhythm that began to capture the attention of everyone in the hall. Each sound he produced seemed to carry a piece of his heart, and the audience could feel it, even if they didn't know exactly why. The room was quieter now. The whispers and giggles from the earlier moments had stopped, replaced by a growing curiosity that hung in the air like a gentle mist. He began to play a simple melody he had composed himself, something that came naturally to him, flowing from the countless hours he had spent practicing alone. The tune was soft at first, almost like a lullaby, but as he continued, it grew richer, more expressive. Each note seemed to tell a story, as if the piano were speaking for him, revealing emotions he couldn't put into words. The audience leaned forward, unable to look away. Some children sat completely still, their eyes wide with wonder. Adults who had initially doubted him now found themselves watching in disbelief, surprised by the depth of emotion coming from such a small child. The boy's confidence grew with every passing measure. He no longer thought about the audience, the whispers, or the laughter that had filled the hall before. His mind was completely focused on the music, on the way each note felt beneath his fingers. His body moved with the rhythm, small nods of his head and gentle sways in time with the melody. It was as though he and the piano had become one, two separate beings creating a single beautiful sound that seemed to float through the room. He started to add small embellishments, little flourishes that made the melody more interesting without being showy. It was subtle but powerful. People began to notice the skill in his hands, the ease with which he navigated the keys. Some leaned forward in their seats, mesmerized. Even the children who had been snickering earlier were now completely captivated, forgetting to whisper, forgetting to laugh. Their attention was entirely on the boy and the music filling the hall. A man sitting near the back, probably a local musician, raised his eyebrows in surprise. He whispered to his companion, "Where did he learn to play like that?" It wasn't just the notes themselves but the expression, the feeling, the way the boy made the piano come alive that was astonishing. The boy didn't play to show off. He played because it was a part of him, a way to express what he could not say with words. The audience felt this, sensing the truth in every key, the authenticity in every pause, the honesty in every chord. As the melody progressed, the boy began to explore a slightly more complicated sequence, moving his fingers faster, creating small runs that were precise and deliberate. Each note was clear and bright, yet it carried an emotional weight that was remarkable for someone so young. He felt the rhythm in his bones, letting the music flow naturally without thinking too hard. The audience could see it too, the way he was completely immersed, lost in the world of the piano. A few people started to whisper to each other in astonishment. "I can't believe it," one said softly. "He's just a little boy, but he's playing like a professional." Others nodded, their faces showing the same mixture of surprise and admiration. Some even leaned forward, resting their elbows on their knees, completely engrossed in the performance. The energy in the room had changed entirely. Where there had been doubt and amusement before, now there was respect and fascination. The boy's eyes were closed as he played, not because he wanted to show off, but because it helped him concentrate, helped him feel the music in a deeper way. He could hear every note in his head before his fingers struck the keys, each sound building on the last. The audience could sense his focus, the care he took with every note, the intensity of his concentration. Even without understanding music theory, people could feel the skill, the emotion, and the dedication in his playing. Time seemed to slow as he continued. The hall, once filled with movement and whispers, was now completely still. Even the parents of other children, who had been chatting quietly, were now silent, their attention fixed on the small boy who had somehow commanded the entire room. Each chord struck had a presence, a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the air, touching everyone in subtle ways. People began to shift in their seats, some leaning closer, some holding their breath, waiting to see what would come next. He transitioned to a slightly faster section, showing off his ability to handle rhythm and timing with ease. His fingers moved nimbly, not rushed, but perfectly timed. The music had a flow that was mesmerizing, a gentle wave rising and falling, capturing the attention of every listener. Children's eyes were wide with amazement, some mouths slightly open in awe. Adults were nodding subtly, some smiling quietly, appreciating the unexpected talent displayed before them. The boy's performance had gone beyond mere notes and chords. It was storytelling, a journey of emotion and expression. The boy felt a growing confidence with each passing moment. He began to add small touches, the little things he had learned in his private practice sessions that made the music come alive. A slight pause here, a gentle emphasis there, a subtle shift in tone that made the melody feel richer. It was natural, almost effortless, and yet it required immense skill and understanding. The audience could sense it. The simple melody from the beginning had transformed into something more intricate and moving, a display of raw, undeniable talent. A woman sitting near the side of the hall whispered to her friend, "He's incredible. I've never seen anything like this." Her friend nodded, eyes still fixed on the boy's hands. Even those who had been skeptical at the start now looked at him with admiration and wonder. The atmosphere in the hall was electric, not with noise, but with attention and appreciation. Everyone was waiting, almost holding their breath, to see what the boy would do next. He continued, seamlessly weaving the original melody with more complex variations, showing not just technical skill, but musicality and emotion that was rare for someone his age. The music seemed to tell a story, one that everyone could feel even if they didn't understand the notes. There were moments of quiet tenderness, moments of playful lightness, and moments of power and intensity. The audience was captivated, caught up in the journey the boy was taking them on with each press of the keys. As the first half of this part of the performance came to a gentle pause, he lifted his hands slightly above the keys, taking a deep breath. The room was silent, as if the music had cast a spell over everyone present. People looked around at each other, sharing expressions of amazement and disbelief. The boy's small, humble presence had grown into something extraordinary, something no one could ignore. For a moment, there were no children laughing, no adults whispering, only a collective awe for the young musician before them. He smiled slightly, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. The music had carried him forward, had transformed the room, had captured hearts without him needing to speak a word. And now, as he prepared to continue, he knew he had the attention and respect of everyone in the hall. The stage no longer felt intimidating. It was a place where he could share the music that lived inside him, a world he had created with patience, practice, and heart. The boy pressed his fingers to the keys again, ready to continue the performance, unaware that the second part of his music would further stun everyone watching, leaving them amazed and inspired. As the boy continued to play, something extraordinary began to happen. The music that had started softly and simply now transformed into something vibrant and dynamic. His fingers flew over the keys with growing confidence, producing melodies that twisted and turned, building tension and then releasing it in beautiful waves. The audience, already captivated by his previous notes, now found themselves completely absorbed. Even those who had doubted him at the beginning were leaning forward, mouths slightly open, eyes wide in disbelief. The boy's playing had a rhythm and flow that was mesmerizing. He moved through the piano with a combination of precision and passion that was unusual for someone his age. Each chord resonated clearly, each note carefully placed, yet full of emotion. The hall seemed to vibrate with the sound, the music filling every corner. It was as though the boy had created an invisible thread that connected everyone in the room, pulling them into the world he was shaping with his music. A few parents glanced at each other in astonishment, shaking their heads slightly as if trying to comprehend what they were witnessing. Children who had been whispering and giggling were now sitting perfectly still, their eyes glued to the piano. The boy's performance had captured not just attention but hearts. People could feel the intensity and honesty behind each note, and it left them unable to look away. He moved into a faster section, adding runs that danced across the keys with ease. His fingers were light and nimble, producing a sound that seemed both deliberate and effortless. The audience was silent, completely focused, absorbing every rise and fall of the melody. It was no longer just a performance. It was an experience, something that felt alive and personal. People could sense the boy's dedication, the countless hours he had spent practicing, and the love he had for the music. Even the skeptical adults began to whisper among themselves, expressing disbelief and admiration. "He's amazing," one said quietly. "Where did he learn to play like this?" Another shook their head, almost unable to believe the skill and emotion coming from someone so young. The boy, unaware of these whispers, remained completely focused on his playing, lost in the rhythm and sound of the piano. He was not performing for praise. He was performing because he could not stop himself from expressing what was inside. As the music swelled, he began to experiment with dynamics, playing softly one moment and then with surprising power the next. The contrast made the melody even more compelling, drawing the audience in further. Children were now leaning forward, completely mesmerized, and adults found themselves holding their breath during certain moments, as if afraid to break the spell the boy had cast. His fingers moved with confidence, the music flowing through him and into the hall, leaving a tangible impact that was impossible to ignore. A local musician sitting in the back had his eyes fixed on the boy's hands. He could see the technique, the speed, and the control, but it was the emotion that truly amazed him. He whispered to his neighbor, "He's not just playing, he's telling a story. He's only a child, but listen to the depth of what he's expressing." His companion nodded, equally impressed, both of them silently marveling at the unexpected brilliance. The boy shifted into a dramatic section, striking the keys with deliberate strength, creating a sense of tension and urgency in the melody. The audience was held captive, sensing the intensity of the music. Some children covered their mouths in awe, while a few adults leaned forward, completely drawn into the experience. The boy's hands moved faster now, but there was no panic, no hesitation. Every note was intentional, every chord carefully considered. It was a remarkable display of talent and focus. He paused briefly, taking a deep breath, and then continued with a softer, more delicate passage. The sudden change in tone made the music even more striking. Listeners felt a shiver as the notes rang out, subtle and clear, almost like whispers in the quiet hall. The boy's control over the piano allowed him to create a story, a journey with highs and lows, excitement and calm, tension and release. It was a performance that demanded attention and deserved admiration. People in the audience exchanged glances, some with surprise, some with pride, and others with pure amazement. The room had completely changed from the skeptical, giggling atmosphere that had greeted him at the beginning. Now, every person present was focused on the music, captivated by the boy's ability to bring the piano to life. There was a shared sense of wonder, a collective recognition of talent and passion that transcended age. The boy's eyes were closed again, allowing him to feel the music fully. He wasn't thinking about who was watching or what they might be feeling. He was completely immersed, moving with the melody, letting it flow through him. Each note he played seemed to have a purpose, each chord a part of a larger picture. The audience could sense it, drawn into the narrative unfolding through the piano. They felt the emotions he poured into each key, a blend of innocence, determination, and joy. As he continued, he added subtle embellishments, small flourishes that enhanced the melody without taking away from its clarity. These touches showed not only his technical skill but also his musical intuition, the ability to feel the music deeply and express it authentically. Children's eyes widened in wonder, and adults nodded in appreciation, some whispering quietly to each other in disbelief. The boy's performance had transformed from a simple display of talent into a moving, emotional experience for everyone in the hall. The pace quickened again, but this time with controlled energy, a flow that was both exciting and precise. The audience felt the momentum building, their anticipation growing with each note. The boy's small frame seemed to disappear behind the power and emotion of the music, leaving only the connection between him, the piano, and the listeners. It was impossible to look away, impossible not to feel something as the notes resonated through the room. The music then shifted to a gentle, melodic passage, softening the atmosphere. The contrast made the powerful moments even more striking. Children leaned closer to hear every sound, and adults felt the emotional weight of the music, caught up in the journey the boy was leading them on. His hands moved delicately, each note intentional, each pause meaningful. It was a performance that spoke without words, conveying emotion directly from the heart. The audience's reactions became more visible. A few adults wiped their eyes discreetly, touched by the beauty of the moment. Some children whispered to their neighbors, expressing amazement in hushed tones. The boy, oblivious to their reactions, continued to play, fully absorbed in the music. He was a conduit for something much larger than himself, channeling years of practice, patience, and passion into a performance that no one in the hall would ever forget. As the music approached its climax, the boy played with confidence and skill, the notes rising and falling with precision. The hall was silent, everyone holding their breath, completely immersed. The melody was now complex, emotional, and striking, leaving the audience in awe. Each chord seemed to resonate with the emotions of the listeners, creating a connection that went beyond words. The boy's talent was undeniable, his presence on the stage commanding attention and respect. He played the final notes of this section with care, allowing each sound to linger and fade naturally. The audience sat in stunned silence, absorbing the power of what they had just witnessed. There was a moment of stillness, a shared recognition that they had seen something extraordinary. The boy lifted his hands from the keys, taking a deep breath, and looked around the hall. He saw astonished faces, wide eyes, and gentle smiles. The laughter and whispers from the beginning were now completely gone, replaced by admiration and awe. The boy realized, in that moment, that he had captured the hearts of everyone in the room. He had faced doubt and ridicule, and through his music, he had transformed the atmosphere entirely. The audience had moved from skepticism to amazement, and the boy felt a quiet sense of pride and accomplishment. He knew that this was only the beginning, that there was still more music to play, more emotions to share. But in that moment, he allowed himself to feel the impact of his performance, the connection he had created through the power of his talent and the purity of his expression. The music in the hall had reached a level that few could have expected from such a small boy. The audience was no longer merely watching. They were feeling. Each note carried emotion that seemed to touch everyone differently but equally. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound fill their hearts, while others sat frozen in awe, their faces reflecting a mixture of surprise, admiration, and even tears. The boy's performance had become more than talent on display. It was an emotional journey, and the audience was traveling with him. He shifted into a softer, more intimate melody, one that seemed to speak directly to each listener. The notes were gentle, almost like whispers, drawing people in. Parents glanced at each other, their eyes glistening as they realized the depth of expression coming from a child who had seemed so small and timid at the beginning. The boy's hands moved gracefully, each keystroke precise, delicate, yet filled with feeling. He didn't just play the piano. He communicated through it, sharing a piece of himself with everyone in the room. Children who had been restless moments before were now completely still. Some leaned forward, resting their chins on their hands, captivated by the sounds emanating from the piano. They watched the boy's fingers dance across the keys, amazed that someone so young could produce such beautiful, moving music. It was a lesson in dedication, in patience, in the quiet strength of pursuing something with love and focus. The music spoke to them in a way words could not, showing them the power of passion and commitment. The boy's confidence was now evident in every movement. He had moved past his initial nervousness, past the doubts and laughter of the audience. He was entirely focused on the music, lost in a world that belonged to him alone. His eyes were sometimes closed, sometimes looking down at the keys, but always filled with concentration and emotion. The piano had become an extension of himself, and through it, he was able to convey emotions too profound for speech. A few adults in the audience found themselves moved beyond what they had expected. Some wiped tears discreetly from their eyes, feeling the raw emotion and sincerity of the boy's playing. They whispered to each other, almost unable to believe what they were witnessing. "He's extraordinary," one said quietly. "I've never heard anything like it," another replied. It wasn't just skill they were witnessing. It was the ability to touch hearts, to connect with people through art, to communicate in a universal language. The boy transitioned to a more complex sequence, combining delicate notes with sudden bursts of speed and power. The contrasts were breathtaking, and the audience felt every change in tempo, every rise and fall in intensity. It was as if he were telling a story with his hands, narrating chapters without words. Each chord struck with intention, each melody line flowing naturally into the next. The room was silent except for the music, and in that silence the emotional impact was profound. People were leaning closer in their seats, unable to look away, absorbed by the performance. The small child, who had entered the stage trembling and uncertain, now commanded the attention and respect of everyone in the hall. The laughter and skepticism from earlier had vanished, replaced by complete admiration. Children watched in awe, perhaps imagining themselves one day having that same skill and passion. Adults were reminded of the surprises life could hold, of the hidden talents and determination that could exist quietly, unnoticed, until a moment like this brought them to light. The boy's melody then shifted into a reflective, slower passage, each note hanging in the air longer, echoing softly across the hall. The audience was transfixed, caught up in the emotion of the moment. Some parents thought of their own children, their dreams, their hidden potential, and felt a pang of pride and hope. Others simply let themselves be carried away, feeling the beauty of the music without trying to analyze or understand it. It was enough to simply feel, to let the sound fill them with awe and admiration. The boy's hands never faltered. His focus was absolute and his connection to the piano deep. He played not for applause, not for recognition, but because he needed to, because the music was a part of him. And the audience responded, sensing the authenticity and sincerity in every note. Children sat with wide eyes, some leaning toward their parents, pointing in amazement. Adults whispered in hushed tones, sharing the wonder and disbelief that someone so young could convey so much through music. The performance grew in intensity again, the tempo rising and the melody becoming more intricate. His fingers flew across the keys, moving with precision and skill that spoke of years of dedication. The audience felt the music not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Each note seemed to resonate within them, creating emotions they didn't expect. It was a powerful demonstration of talent and expression, a reminder that age does not define ability, and that true dedication and passion could create something extraordinary. A man sitting toward the back, probably a musician himself, watched with a mixture of awe and admiration. He whispered to the person next to him, "This child is incredible. It's not just the skill, it's the emotion, the understanding of music. He's telling a story that everyone can feel." His companion nodded, equally captivated, both silently acknowledging the rare brilliance they were witnessing. It was more than a performance. It was a gift, shared with everyone present. The boy then played a sequence of notes that felt almost like a conversation. Soft passages flowed into powerful chords, quick sequences into gentle, lingering tones. The room was alive with the energy of the music, yet there was a calmness too, a sense of connection between the performer and the audience. Everyone felt it, from the youngest child to the oldest adult, a shared experience of beauty and emotion. He approached the final section of this part of his performance with a sense of calm confidence. The melody became more expansive, more expressive, allowing the audience to fully absorb the depth of his talent. Children leaned forward, completely silent, their previous whispers forgotten. Adults held their breath, captivated by the clarity, precision, and emotion in every note. The boy's small hands moved effortlessly across the keys, each chord resonating with intention, each note carrying a story. As the final notes lingered in the air, the hall remained silent for a moment, everyone taking in what they had just experienced. The boy lifted his hands, resting them lightly on the keys, and allowed a small, humble smile to cross his face. He looked out at the audience and saw astonished faces, wide eyes, and gentle smiles. The reaction was overwhelming in its sincerity. The laughter, the doubt, the whispers that had greeted him earlier were now gone, replaced by awe and admiration. The boy had done more than perform. He had touched hearts. He had taken a simple piano, a young child, and transformed the hall into a place where emotion and talent could be felt deeply by everyone present. Parents whispered words of encouragement and praise. Children clapped softly, some even teary-eyed, and the atmosphere was electric with respect and wonder. The music had created a shared moment, a memory that everyone would carry with them. In that moment, the boy realized the power of what he had done. He had faced skepticism and doubt, and through his music, he had changed minds and hearts. He had shown that talent, dedication, and passion could break through prejudice and disbelief. The audience had been moved, not just by skill, but by the honesty, the emotion, and the connection he had shared. It was a triumph, not measured in applause, but in the deep human response it had evoked. The boy took a deep breath, ready to continue, knowing that the next part of his performance would leave an even stronger impression. The boy pressed the keys one last time, letting the final notes linger in the hall. The sound hung in the air, soft and clear, a perfect ending to the journey he had taken everyone on. The audience was silent, as if caught in a dream, letting the music sink in fully. Slowly, hands began to clap, softly at first, then growing louder, filling the hall with genuine appreciation. It was not the polite clapping that greeted the first performances but a heartfelt, instinctive reaction to something extraordinary they had just witnessed. The boy lifted his hands from the keys, slightly trembling but smiling. He had given everything to the performance, and now he could see the effect it had on everyone. Faces that had been skeptical, amused, or indifferent at the beginning were now filled with amazement, admiration, and warmth. Children were staring with wide eyes, whispering to each other, trying to express in words what the music had made them feel. Adults were nodding, some wiping away tears, some leaning forward as though they couldn't believe what they had just experienced. A few people approached him from the front rows, their eyes full of genuine surprise and praise. One older woman spoke first, her voice trembling slightly. "You were incredible," she said softly. "I've never heard anything like that. You played with your heart." Another parent, who had been watching quietly from the back, stepped forward and said, "Your talent is amazing, and your music reached everyone here. It was beautiful." The boy nodded quietly, too shy to speak much, but he felt the warmth of their words, the recognition of his effort, and the encouragement that had carried him through so many hours of practice. The announcer came forward, smiling broadly, clearly moved herself. She lifted the microphone and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have just witnessed something very special. This young boy has reminded us all what talent, dedication, and heart can create. Let's give him another round of applause." The hall erupted once more, the sound echoing off the walls, as people clapped, cheered, and even whistled in admiration. The boy's cheeks flushed with a mixture of pride and embarrassment, but he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his music had reached everyone. Some of the children who had been laughing at him at the beginning now approached him shyly, their faces full of awe. "How did you learn to play like that?" one asked. Another said, "I wish I could play like you someday." The boy smiled gently, trying to offer encouragement. He didn't have a dramatic answer, only that he had practiced a lot, often in quiet moments alone. His story was simple, but the truth of it inspired them. They could see that dedication, patience, and love for something could create results that even adults could not ignore. The applause gradually died down, but the room still hummed with admiration and conversation about what had just happened. People discussed the complexity of his melodies, the emotion behind every note, and the discipline it must have taken to reach such a level at such a young age. Teachers, musicians, and parents alike were marveling at the way he had transformed a small talent show into an unforgettable moment. The boy's performance was being talked about not just as skill, but as an experience that had touched hearts, moved emotions, and inspired everyone in the room. The boy's family, who had been sitting quietly in the back, rose to their feet, their eyes brimming with tears of pride. They had known his dedication, his countless hours of practice, and the love he had for the piano. Now everyone else could see it too. Their encouragement and support had been silent, but it had nurtured something powerful, and they could feel the recognition and admiration pouring over him like a warm wave. As people continued to approach him, some offering praise, others curious about his journey, a few local music teachers and performers stepped forward with invitations. They suggested lessons, opportunities to perform in other venues, and even participation in local competitions. The boy listened quietly, absorbing the information, aware that his life had shifted subtly but significantly. What had started as a nervous attempt to play at a small talent show had now opened doors to new opportunities and experiences. The boy took a moment to breathe, feeling the weight of the attention but also a quiet excitement. He realized that the performance had shown him the power of expressing oneself through passion and practice. He had faced doubt, ridicule, and uncertainty, but by trusting himself and his ability, he had captured the admiration and respect of everyone present. It was a lesson he would carry forward, not just about music, but about perseverance, courage, and the importance of following one's heart. Some audience members stayed longer, lingering to speak to the boy personally, to shake his hand, or to ask questions about his music. Others left with a sense of wonder, talking among themselves about the remarkable talent they had witnessed. The small community hall had become a place of inspiration, a reminder that extraordinary abilities could emerge from the most unexpected places. The boy's performance had created a moment that would be remembered, a story that would be told for years to come. Later, as the hall emptied and the boy packed his notebook and left the stage, he felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. He had done what he had set out to do. He had shared his music honestly, with heart and dedication, and it had touched people deeply. He walked with a calm confidence, no longer the nervous, timid child who had stepped onto the stage earlier. He knew that his music had power, that his dedication could create moments of beauty and emotion for others. The experience changed him, giving him a sense of belief in himself that went beyond talent. It was a lesson in courage, in showing up despite fear, and in trusting the work he had put in over the years. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition were affirming, but more than that, he realized that the true reward was the connection he had made through his music. People had felt something real, something authentic, and he had been the messenger. The boy walked out of the hall with his family, who praised him quietly and warmly. They knew that this was just the beginning, that there would be more stages, more performances, and more opportunities to share his music. But for now, he carried with him the memory of the audience's astonishment, the energy of the hall, and the knowledge that his passion and dedication could create a lasting impact. It was a moment of triumph, not just in skill, but in courage, expression, and the power of following one's heart. The little boy, once doubted and laughed at, had become a source of inspiration, leaving an impression that would remain long after the final notes had faded.